Welcome back to the Two Mods podcast presented by Sheena Boychuk Real Estate. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall, and I have a very special guest with me this evening. We have Michael Futa. Foods, how's it going?
Want my honest answer?
Well, I think if we saw Twitter, I think
you've got a very. I'm not a guy that responds but like yesterday, I've got this treadmill work that I've been doing. My parents were visiting. My dad had to go back in for a checkup there, and I have not had an episode where I screamed at a TV set at a sporting event that had nothing to do with my life in general until I watched that unfold yesterday with a guy pitching his lights out against his former team, and analytics kicks in, and I was just disgusted. I mean, I've gone to see a lot of Jays games live. I'm a huge supporter of the Toronto sports teams, and I was in just disbelief that just it sucks the life out of what sports are supposed to be. I mean, I know analytics is a key involved in scouting and drafting players and stuff like that, but to watch that unfold and not have any feel for the actual game itself made me sick. So
what happens now?
First time I'm a sports fan angered out to a point that it affected my sleep.
Yeah. So what happens now with the Blue Jays? Like, what does Rogers do? Like, what is, like if anyone watched, like I know we're a hockey podcast, but if anyone watched, the Bo Bichette after the game, he pretty much called the organization out. Like, I'm pretty much sure that's what Jamie Campbell took it as too when they went back to the panel. Like, it's been 2 years in a row here. They've got, I understand too, they haven't got any runs, and that's big on him too. He's one of the best players, but like the fact that you took out probably the best pitcher and the pitcher that's been humming pretty good in Brios, like, I don't know how that makes any sense.
But it's the same thing. I mean, you can tie it to hockey too, because there's certain players that you can't, like, for example, like I really pushed when Dean Lombardi wanted us to have a culture changing draft. I really pushed hard for a player like Kyle Clifford, whose analytics would not in any way suggest that he should have been taken at the top of the second round.
Yeah.
But you can't find a mathematical equation that measures character and compete. And it doesn't mean it's not a helpful statistic or helpful in the process. But when it becomes the key, the stamp of approval for the process, it's a recipe for disaster. And it makes sports unwatchable. I mean, they talked about the Jake Snell, the Snell incident years ago with Tampa that cost them. Last year, it cost the Jays. I mean, I've seen it in hockey. Certain players get jumped over because their analytics don't match up. And then, for example, you would have no time. When I was in Carolina, Roddy Brind'Amour wanted Nick Delorier bad, right? He wanted that element, that kind of teammate. Nick Delorier is one of the best teammates in the National Hockey League, but his analytics aren't great at all. And that player wasn't acquired because his analytics didn't add up.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that when you're building a team, you better be damn careful structuring it just based on numbers. And then when you're certainly plotting a strategy for how your team's going to play, to allow numbers to not dictate pure athletic greatness, which was being shown yesterday by Brios, and to not be able to see how dialed in he was. And the thing that kills me about it too, Josh, is, and I know if you watch the game, but if he walked the guy to start an inning and he was immediately taken out when he was throwing peas the whole day. But the thing is, what I was told is, even if he had struck that first batter out, he was coming out.
Just because analytics was saying.
Analytics said that they thought Kikuchi was going to come in and he fared better as a left-handed, and none of it made sense because he's not a reliever. He's in a totally just factual basis. He's not a reliever. He's not used to coming out. He's not used to coming in with runners on base. He's not properly warming up for a game like that. So, anyways, thanks for getting my baseball vent out of the way. But it rears its head in hockey as well. So it's again, it can, as great as they are and a great tool they are, they're a tool that goes in the blender with what you see with your eye test, your gut feeling, your ability to meet somebody and find out their character they have. And my God, if sports is just going into numbers, what an absolute disappointment that would be.
Do you think coaches have the autonomy to kind of, when they're told this information, it's fed through the microphone or through the headset, or obviously a head coach in the NHL is not wearing a headset, so it's the assistant coaches. But say if upstairs it's relayed to the assistant coach and the assistant coach relays it to the head coach, does the head coach, from what you understand, have the autonomy to say no, I'm not going with that in hockey?
I don't think in hockey. I think in hockey it's a different beast. I mean, I think in hockey the management and they use all their analytics to decide which players are going to be on the roster, and I believe the coach has the final say on who gets used. Like I know I can just use the two coaches that I've been associated with. Daryl Sutter, very little use for analytics. He wanted to know. There were two things he always looked at. I believe one was time of possession with the offensive zone time, and there were some things he felt were critical that if the numbers were there, you could tell the team was playing because those were traits that they needed. But it was not the be all and end all. And I know for a fact Roddy Brindamore has zero time. Like he doesn't even.
Yeah.
You may as well save the paper you're printing it out on when it comes to who plays and how he coaches his team.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Like, obviously, here in Edmonton, they just hired an analytics, more beefed up their analytics department here in Edmonton. So, and everyone knows what Toronto has done with analytics. But I don't know.
Well, how do you hold someone accountable? And I mean, again, like everybody here right now is to say, Schneider's got to go. But if part of the interview process is that when we provide you this information, you have to follow it or you're going to be dismissed. Like for me yesterday, I would have had a lot more. I know there was a plan, but I would have had a lot more. Tip my hat to Schneider if he had just read the game and said, "This guy's pitching too well to follow that plan."
Yeah,
like I can't go out there right now. This guy's he's rolling. And then if it had gone the other way, he could have said, "Hey, I'm sorry." Nobody would have complained if all of a sudden someone caught a hold of one and then they said, "Wow, you could have seen that coming." There was no sign of life in Minnesota Twins until they made the change. So, I mean, how do you fire somebody if you tell them you've got to play these guys and then it doesn't work and you say, well, that's your fault? I mean,
yeah.
You got to hold someone accountable by allowing them to coach and allow them to put the guys they want out there. You can provide them the guys and the chemistry, which is another fact altogether with the Jays. I mean, they obviously didn't score any runs. And the base running and all that stuff was off the charts. But
that probably ruined the momentum of the game, though, right?
Yeah, but 100%. You can't tell me it's like if all of a sudden an analytics said whatever, Jonathan Quick, when he gets to a certain amount of shots, his game tops off, or you got to get him out of there, and he's out there pitching a shutout, and all of a sudden you change the goaltender because you're like, you know what, numbers have it that. He
after
dips
27 shots.
He's got 47 shots. He dips, and then you look at the other team, and they see this guy coming out of the game. They're like, "Wow, oh my gosh, he's coming out!" Like it's off the charts. And trust me, those kind of numbers are stuff that's starting to rear their heads, and where you totally lose the feel of the game, and even sometimes the gut feeling on who should start net or who should match up against whom. It's unbelievable. And I mean, the other way to look at it too is you can try and build a line by the numbers and say this should just work. Like this should just work, but you don't know. Like you never know when the production line, when a line's actually going to just gel to a point that they're incredible. Like I mean, last year when Bunting all of a sudden had incredible chemistry with Matthews and Marner, that's not one you're sure that's going to happen, and you can write it down. I mean, when we were in Los Angeles. I mean, we acquired Kovalchuk, and Kovalchuk on his own is an incredible hockey player. He's a stud, but we couldn't find anybody that had chemistry with him. So you can put down Kopitar, Brown, and Kovalchuk and think, man, this has got a nice match to it. And then it just had nothing. There was no chemistry anywhere that we could find to get the best out of what he had with his attributes. And now you see the same thing, like with the Leafs, for example, you put it on paper. And that's why players like Hyman and Brown are just magic, right? Because you can slot them in, and the odds are they're such accountable players that they're going to make that line tick. They're not going to be the guy that drives the line, but they're going to be such a huge supplement to cover so many positive assets. And now you see what they're trying with, you write it down and you think Matthews, Marner, and Bertuzzi should be just awesome, right? But they haven't hit their stride yet. They haven't found that chemistry yet. Which will be interesting. It'll be interesting. That's why it's such a long season. But And when you finally do hit a home run, it was like when we won our second cup, nobody ever thought that Jeff Carter was going to be flanked by Tyler Toffoli and Tanner Pearson, and they were going to have a '70s line that was unbeatable. But it just hit, and the chemistry was there, and they ran the gamut through the playoffs. So it takes a lot of mixing and matching to figure it out. But when you start dry again, when the numbers drive it, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So that'll be enough of our analytics talk.
Thank you.
Exactly. Let's move over to our NHL report, sponsored by Sheena Boychuk. So foods, big news out of Ottawa. Steve Staios comes in as president of hockey operations. Probably not the biggest secret in hockey. I think we all saw this happening. But your thoughts on Steve going into Ottawa and what kind of what that means for the Sens organization going forward here?
Stability, class. I love Steve Staios because I've always had a little bit of an issue with the pro NHL player that kind of just gets appointed based on how good a player he was, and that's just in any industry or any. And there's something to say for the guy that checked all the boxes on the way up, and that's kind of like Yzerman did it. There's nothing more. How would you say it? Intimidating when you're looking across at a Hall of Famer that's out working. It's got the same work ethic as a scout as he did as a player. And Steve basically did everything all the way up the proper way in the Ontario Hockey League. Filling the roles and general manager, winning at the junior level, and then taking his time and learning all the different roles in the National Hockey League, and then all of the great leadership skills and the class that he brought to those. And obviously, he certainly developed a relationship with Mr. Landauer that speaks volumes about the character that he has, and then it just translates. So the comfort level. I guess the biggest thing is Pierre Dorion is the general manager there, and there was no coming in and sweeping Pierre out. So Pierre is going to have to adjust on the fly and realize now that he's always been the boss of the hockey operations, and I'm sure they're going to let him do his job, but there is somebody in place above him to work with, and I'm sure that their tandem is going to be something to watch and see how the chemistry forms there. But again, he's a first-class guy. I know it was a really disappointing thing for him because he's very dialed in his history as an Edmonton Oiler, but full steam ahead. That organization now just seems to have a different feel when you see Mr. Andlauer and all the kind of controversy that was always off the ice and trying to do things on the cheap and stuff. And with the way they've been in the past, it seems like they're just pointed in the right direction. They've got some great young pieces. Like I absolutely love Sanderson as far as what they have in the back end. They look like they have some studs. I think now that you've got some assets and they're at that stage that if you trickle in a couple more, I know it's like we should rename the podcast the Nick Deslauriers Show, but
Exactly.
if I was the Ottawa Senators, I would be on the phone with Philadelphia Flyers trying to acquire somebody like that that I know is a glue in the dressing room, that wants to win a Stanley Cup, brings toughness, that can play, brings exceptional character. He's got the French English background, and then you don't have to have guys like Brady Tkachuk. They can play. Like they're always going to have their odd scrap and stuff like that, but people are going to think twice about running at him because they know he's not going to back down. And you don't need your star player in the penalty box or breaking a knuckle in a fight or feeling that he has to do the work that somebody else could do. And they've got so many young assets there like Stützle and Sanderson and Chabot that if you bring in, I guess there's a little bit of question marks in the net, but and they probably could use a big right shot D presence, but they're at that stage that it's time for them to start making some hay. And I think Stevie Staios is going to, obviously when you go in, you got to, anyway you slice it, he's been on Edmonton Oilers, Travis. You know everything about the Edmonton Oilers. Now you kind of got to get your feet wet with a new organization and learn. The same thing with Brad coming from Calgary to Toronto. You got to get used to new people and new staff and give people a chance. Maybe bring a few people of your own in and get ready to go, because there's not much time from the time he was announced to the time the season puck drops. So it'll be good. I feel good for DJ Smith too, to have some good support there and a little bit more, some more assets and players with something to prove on his lineup there.
Yeah. And, it's been such noise around there for such a long time. And now I kind of breathe a bit, but and we'll see what happens in some of the veteran players coming in. Like maybe the guys like Alfredson if they come back and are part of the
Oh,
organization.
I could see Alfredson being announced to some role before the season starts for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that would be pretty cool. We'll move over to the St. Louis Blues, and a good friend of yours and a kid that he's not even a kid no more, but maybe we still think he's a kid. But I know this news broke when we had Paul Bissonnette on, and that was a couple of weeks ago. But Brayden Schenn being announced captain of the St. Louis Blues, and your expectations of the Blues this year. But first thoughts on him being captain and how much that means to you, and how much it means to him, and the season that you expect from the Blues.
Um, I'm thrilled for. He's one of my. I mean, again, you treat these. I mean, people talk about them as assets, and even though you talk, it always kills me, Josh. Whenever you talk to a dad now, and they don't call their kid by his name, they call him by his birth date. Oh, my kid's he's an '08.
Yeah. Yes.
What's his name? Oh, he's an '08.
He's
So they go right to the draft year. Well, the Schenn family is absolutely remarkable. It's one of the best house visits I've ever been a part of in his draft year, and we ended up taking him in the sixth or seventh round, or sorry, sixth or seventh overall. I can't remember what it was. And you just knew that he had that. I kind of felt it was like Mike Richards is my ultimate leader, right? Like that I've ever been around in hockey in any capacity. Probably throw Justin Williams into the mix, Matt Green. There's Jared Stoll. I mean, it's incredibly off the charts the leadership that these guys have as far as that throwback, but willing to do anything to win. And Schenner was kind of in a tough spot with us because we were solid. He was kind of at that point that he was too good for the American League and and too good to go back to junior. And we ended up kind of keeping him around for his 10 games, and then he went to the World Juniors and he just completely lit it up. And then we ended up I think they hosted we thought it was a big deal because he got traded to his hometown team. I think was hosting the Memorial Cup, and it was a tough year in him because he was too good for the American, too good for junior. And when you're forced to go back and play junior, sometimes it's hard to get yourself motivated. But every bit of adversity he came through, he just comes in flying colors. And I mean, I said it was one of the toughest yet happiest days of my existence when Dean told me we were trading Schenner and Wayne Simmons, who's another kid that I've obviously very close to the Philadelphia Flyers for Mike Richards. And then Schenner goes on to, we always said you guys got to find a way to get a cup. And I remember Schenner calling after this and say, "Oh, I got one, Futa. I got one." And then we've just kept in touch. He's just a wonderful guy. And it's the apple doesn't fall far because obviously his brother Luke. But I mean, that day that we were on, I said, "Hey, congrats, Captain. Well deserved. Thanks, Fuchs. Appreciates the message. Thanks always for the support. Without you believing in me in the beginning, this doesn't happen." Those are the best. Those are the best messages you could ever get in your existence. When people just really, they're just competitors, wonderful competitors, and great. Okay, it starts from the family, but very proud of them. It's a great selection. When you think about how not too far back they were Stanley Cup champions, and then to have the disappointment of last year, that's a pretty solid leader to be able to hook your wagon to get you back to where you want to be.
Yeah, he tremendous player on the ice for sure, and everything that you said from him off the ice. I don't know him, but we've heard a lot of great things about him, and
Have to get him on your podcast.
Yes, we'll have to figure something out, right? So we'll have to figure something out. We'll have to bug you again, Foods, for
Get my Rolodex.
yeah, exactly. So but yeah, so no, I think it's pretty cool, and I think they'll have a good season. That Central Division is going to be an interesting one. Obviously, I think everyone looks at Colorado and Dallas as the two top teams there, but maybe St. Louis can kind of turn back the clock a bit. They got some younger players. Maybe their younger players can take a step, see what Jordan Bidding can do in net, and see if he can get bounced back because we need the goaltending depth in Canada is in question right now, and I think he's a guy that has the pedigree to be that guy to take the.
Got to concentrate on stopping pucks and not dropping his mitts.
Yeah, I want him to drop the mitts though.
It's hilarious though because that kid, somebody sent me a tape of my and it just made me laugh because I remember I knew Jordan obviously from his Owen Sound days, but when I brought the Stanley Cup to Owen Sound, somebody had filmed the whole thing, and part of the day when I brought it to Owen Sound was the attack players were in their jerseys signing autographs, and as I'm walking the Stanley Cup up to put it on the podium there for the people to take pictures with it. The first guy you see signing autographs is this skinny Jordan Binnington. And I was laughing because I still his combine interview. I always bugged Ron Hextall because I'm a big, like, when a kid, you can tell a kid's a student of the game that he watches hockey. And we were interviewing goaltenders for the draft from Western Canada, and I was like, "Do you know who Ron Hextall is?" And the kid was like, "Does he own like a garage?" And like, what? Does he own a garage in the? No, he's one of the top goaltenders ever, who's played in Brandon, who brags about the West constantly. And then when I asked Jordan Binnington, he's like, "Oh, Hexy, I love Hexy. I got posters of Hexy all around my room, man. He's so nasty. He's such a, he scraps, he does all that stuff." And I'm like, okay. I had to tell Hexy the only guy that knew him was a goaltender from Ontario, but it was funny the way Binner translated himself into, quite the scrappy player who had that great successful run and I'd forgotten that when they went to OHL championship, they ran 3 goaltenders and Binner was one of them that was very successful. So good on him for what he's accomplished, but he's got to get his game back to the elite level that he had when they did win the cup.
Yeah. We'll move over to the Leafs. Very well said there by you. We'll move over to Toronto here. Big preseason game tonight. They're pretty much dressing their full entire team. Maybe just a few guys. They're a little bit nicked up on the back end with Timmins and Klingberg out. So Benoit is going to kind of get in on the right side on the second pairing with Jake McCabe. So we'll see what he can do. He's got some NHL games under his belt. But a player that I'm interested in seeing again, and he'll play in the 3 slot here, is Fraser Minton's. Where do you come out on him? 19 years old. He could go back to to junior here, but in that role, there's an opening, and I don't know if it's going to be a Noah Gregor finishing that spot off. I know Noah's played some center in San Jose, but do you think it's the right situation to have a 19-year-old in with a team that has a lot of pressure on getting over the hump, or if he earns the job, I guess, right, Futs?
It all depends who the 19-year-old is, and
Yeah.
this kid has done nothing but. I mean, and it's not like Toronto sports fans to go over the top when somebody's doing well.
That doesn't happen. Yeah.
But no, but it's like right now it looks like, from what I've seen, Matthew Nyes looks like he's what he's supposed to be, and this kid has been every training camp. Dean Lombardi used to say there's some golden child that comes out of it that just pops out of nowhere and is one of those surprises that, like, for us, it was Wayne Simmons, who we didn't expect, at the one training camp, and he came in and you're like, wow, this kid's just refusing to be cut. Like, you can't let him go. Now, what you have to be sure of is that you're not going to get to a standpoint. The consistency with which he's been great at in this training camp is what I've really liked, right? And it looks like he brings a dimension that you just need, and he brings a very low salary cap hit, which you need with this group. And I love everything he's done. I hope he keeps it up. I mean, there's no reason. Again, this is right back, but it's like Berrios.
Yeah.
There's no reason to take him out if you're playing that way every night and you're looking great. Why do you walk up to this kid and say, "Okay, you are absolutely phenomenal. You've done everything we asked. Let's send you back to junior"? It's like, no, he's. I think especially now, what people are when people are looking at that, you need a good young player to come in and light things up and provide a new spark and a new energy. And he's been absolutely phenomenal. And every radio station, I know, I was listening to Justin Bourne the other day go on about him, and I mean, everything about what he's done has said, hey, you've earned a spot on this hockey team. And then again, you've got 9 games to ride him out and find out if it's for real at the regular season level before you have to make a decision on whether you send him back or not. But everything about him I've loved. And again, the only part of what, again, this concerns me about the Leafs is I still have a big question mark about Klingberg. And again, I hope for the Leafs' sake that it works out. I just think I just don't see $4 million reasons based on what he's done in his last couple stops. But then again, it's a 1-year deal that he's got to prove. He's got to prove his ilk. But again, he's banged up already. If I'm another team, I'm focusing on running him through the M boards constantly, because people, if you want to go to your analytics, his defensive analytics are amongst the worst in the National Hockey League. And I don't see this elite offensive player yet that allows you to overlook his dark spots in his own zone. But
Mhm.
hopefully,
I
Kiefer
wonder,
can get the best out of him.
you know Tree very well. Like, I wonder, do you think Tree at any point when he signed that contract with him for the 1 year deal, he looked back at the last time maybe he saw him in a playoff series when was against Calgary when Dallas and Calgary were playing, and Klingberg fought Kachuk twice, and in that playoff series is the best of seven. Flames won in seven, as everyone knows, but the different side of Klingberg that we never saw. Maybe there's a bit of feistiness. That's saying it like
Well,
he
and I remember that series well, but I just,
that wasn't enough to say I'm giving you
well,
4
I mean,
million.
Tree would have seen it firsthand, and I mean,
Yeah,
I thought about that as well because I mean, again, and obviously him coming in and knowing, um, and having to deal with a new staff and a new. I mean, obviously his Calgary people would have had an idea, and again, the Toronto group obviously loved what they see in this kid as well. But I just, and again, it's one you want to work out because I want to see the team succeed. But if you look at this guy at the trade deadline last year on a team that was clearly selling, there were no buyers, and that kind of scares me that everybody else was seeing the same thing,
yeah,
um, and the numbers backed it up. So hopefully, it's not a as a it's not a city that sleeps on lack of success, and everybody knows that this team is going to be evaluated. I'm sure they're going to have another great regular season, but they're going to be evaluated on what they do in the playoffs. And Klingberg at $4 million a year is going to have to be a big part of it.
yeah. Let's move over to a couple RFAs that aren't signed, in Jamie Drysdale and Shane Pinto. Where are you at with them, and where do you think the dollars come in, the term comes in on both these players here?
Well, I think when it gets this late, um, I think Drysdale, I could see signing a longer term deal. Pinto, I think maybe a shorter term deal, and it's obviously this kid's a big part of their team. So you're gonna, I think it's just a matter of somebody's going to have to. I mean, Philadelphia seems to be the team that they're dealing with in Ottawa that's willing to take on cap money because that's really what it comes down to, and it's a matter of how many assets that you want to attach to it. Whether right now they're asking for a top young player and a first round pick to eat the cap space. Um, if I was in the Ottawa situation, and there's no way I'm letting Pinto go, I'm finding a way to clear out the cap space, whether it's Joseph, and you're going to have to give up something you don't want to give up. I mean, and I would try and find a way to make it. If you're going to have to give up a first round pick and a young player that you don't want to give up, that and plus whether it's a Joseph and his salary, I'd be finding a way to make sure Nick Delorier is coming back the other way.
Yeah,
So that just as much as it hurts you giving up the first, at least you know you're adding a piece and an element that you need up front that's going to help you benefit your team in the long run. But Pinto's, they're going to have to get him signed. I mean, he's just too valuable a piece.
yeah, 20 goal scorer for sure. Let's move over to our Edmonton Oilers report, sponsored by Shadified Salon and Barbershop. They got 3 locations in the Edmonton area. We talked about this player tons of times on the podcast, Foots, me, you, and I, and that's Jack Campbell. But something seems a bit different right now. He's had a pretty good training camp. Jay Woodcroft has come out and said that there's a competition for who's going to start opening night. There's nothing set in stone right now. I hear some banter that how can you not go with Skinner for what he did for you last year and compared to what Campbell did for you last year, and then are you going to base this off of 2 good starts in the preseason? But who starts game 1 for the Edmonton Oilers when they play the Vancouver Canucks come Wednesday night next week?
Well, for me, there's 5 million reasons why Jack, if he's looking like different between the years, shouldn't be the starter. I mean, it's you've got to if everything looks and is. I mean, he's always going to be in good shape, but everything looks like he's slays some of the demons and dragons in his between the ears, and he's in a good place. Let him come out of the gate. Let him come out of the gate as your guy. I mean, and it doesn't mean Skinner. You don't have that ability to go. I mean, they're probably out of all the tandems, they're probably as close to being a 50-50. No one just outshines completely the other. But I think Jack. I thought Jack was going to get the start in the last playoff game as well, and he didn't, and that didn't go well. So I would start with Jack, but I mean, again, it's good to have if they're both playing great and competitive. That's a wonderful story, but I would be going with Jack Campbell to start. And the guys that I just like, the pickup that I absolutely love there, Josh, is, I mean, you see a player like Hyman come in and what he was doing in Toronto, and the Connor Brown, like, this kid is like one of those, again, throwback. He's like a Hyman, another Hyman. I mean,
I'm
this
in
guy,
like, yeah.
yeah. I don't even necessarily know if he's Hyman light, unless he's weighs less than him.
Yeah.
But he's that good. I mean, when this kid, and I mean, I spoke to him briefly in the summer. He's a Toronto kid, and he said he's skating better because he's a kid that always kind of is. It was mystery. Like when he scored, like whatever, he played with McDavid and scored a gazillion goals with the Erie Otters. He always kind of looked like a sloppy kind of skater. But his skating is not an issue now, and in a great way. He fits in like a Swiss Army knife up and down your lineup. He's going to make you better. He's got character coming out as wazoo, and that's the kind of player that I think, that's a big add to the Edmonton dressing room as well, because this kid wants to win, and I mean he's won with Connor in the past, so there's no. You got to know that McDavid's just thrilled when you float in. Not only is he a buddy, but he's a buddy that brings so much to the table.
Yeah. Yeah, he's going to be a fascinating player to watch. It was tough to see him leave Toronto. It was tough to see Hyman leave Toronto as a guy that's a Leaf fan. It was
Oh,
yeah,
it's beyond like,
but that's hockey.
he's every coach's dream, right? But I mean, if the story is true that the reason wouldn't he left Toronto because they wouldn't give him a no move clause, then there's another head scratcher. Because when you got a Toronto kid that's willing to take a bit of a haircut, but he wants to know that he's not going to be moved and he has to stay local, and you're not willing to give him a no trade, that's a big problem. Big problem.
Mm-hmm. Let's move over to our Flames report. And this one will be sponsored by Martelou Barbershop in Calgary. They've got the one location. Go see Nick and the team. Tell them the 2 Months podcast sent you. Big news, obviously, Backlund resigns and gets the captaincy, but obviously some tragic news with Chris Snow. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on someone that was a former, and you sat in the same seat as Chris as an assistant general manager. The rigors that it goes through for that job, but what you know about him, the family, and your dealings with him over your time in the National Hockey League.
It's tragic. Is really, I mean, as much as everybody, I guess, when you're diagnosed, whatever, he was diagnosed 5 years ago with whatever 3 or 4 months left to live, and you just refuse to give up. And then we'd hear that there were some problems and he was taking steps backward, and then you just see him battle right back. And it's so to see someone that has, I guess the thing that resonates with me, other than the most wonderful family, the way they stuck by him with his wife Kelsey and the 2 children, and the way Calgary continued to support him, is the fact that for someone that had such an incredibly contagious, infectious smile, to have that smile taken away from you, and to still project such happiness and warrior like traits and everything you want a successful team to embody, is what Chris Snow brought to the table. And I mean, I'm not a big, hopefully you can rally around it, because bottom line, Calgary Flames have a lot to prove this year, based on basically almost saying all those its lack of success was because Daryl Sutter was nasty last year. They've got a lot to prove this year, and I think anytime you feel sorry for yourself as a person or an athlete, you can just take a quick chapter look at what Snowy went through, and how he continues to be a hero, in his passing in such a bright light. I mean, when I was doing my interview for the GM job with the Flames, whatever, been 3 or 4 months ago, Snowy was actually on the Zoom call, and to just see someone with that, faceless, no smile, still projecting such, just
Positivity and care and
it's
love.
unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable. And right up to the end, I mean, you could see it, like he was still out doing stuff with his family and trips and ball games, and it was just incredible. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's suddenly. And I just hope I mean, I went through, like, when I lost Amazing Grace, the same thing. You just can't make any sense of it. But it also puts into perspective when you start to feel sorry for some of the little misdemeanors you have in your life, and hiccups along the way, that you look at the reality of what true tragedy is and how sad a real story is. You really don't have time to feel sorry for yourself. You just got to fight on and use someone like that as a role model for how life should be lived.
Yeah, yeah, it's a heavy one, but even the ceremony that they had Friday night against the Oilers and Flames, where instead of the moment of silence, it was a moment of celebration, and everyone got up and started cheering and clapping just because that's what they wanted as a family, and he would want as a person. So um, he's a hero in many ways, and he,
Yeah.
his life will live on, and the three people that he helped out, or the four people he helped out there, and what he had donated to helping others, and just what a special person, and it'll be a heavy heart for the Flames this year. But yeah, maybe it's a rallying cry for them and brings that group even tighter together. You'll see what happens there. Your thoughts on Michael Backlund? He's a friend of our podcast. He's a tremendous person. I got nothing but respect for Bax, and a great guy to talk to. He's always engaging to get back to you whenever you need to talk to him about anything. And sometimes it's not even about the game of hockey; it's about life. But him being named captain and re-signing with the Flames.
It's awesome. I mean, those are the kind of players you know you don't want to see walk away,
Yeah,
in under any circumstance. He's kind of, I mean, anybody that I know, like, I'm really close friends with Colin Patterson from the '89 team. When they talk about backs, it's just over the top. Even when Mark Giordano talked to me, and Luch, they just really, like the Foley guys that have played there, they talk about him being the kind of the cornerstone. And even under the tough times, when Daryl Sutter was hard on them, that he had the ability to maintain his composure and understand that you can survive under a tough coach. That he's got that mental toughness, and most Swedish hockey players do. They're
yeah,
amazing. It's just an amazing trust factor that you have in them, and what they bring to the table, and the professionalism and the work ethic, and it's great for the city that you've, for so long. Obviously we have to wait to see. There's a lot of other cards that have to drop, but this is a really interesting situation, I think, with the Flames, because clearly, as I said, they put a lot on Daryl Sutter's ticket is why they didn't succeed. And whatever, ding dong, the witch is dead. Well, they've got a fresh outlook on life, so there's really no excuses. And it's amazing when you look at. I mean, it's going to be fun to watch Dustin Wolf. By the way, I just think this guy. I had a chance to watch this guy in Los Angeles growing up, and what an absolute battler he was. But I always used to say, like, people are so hooked on big goaltenders, and this kid, for whatever reason, has got such a compete level that it's going to be fun to watch. I mean, I saw him doing his little whatever
celebration in Winnipeg the other night.
after the shooting, but I mean, that's just the energy that he brings. I mean,
Does he remind
uh,
you of Quickie at all? Is
what's
there
that?
would Dustin Wolf remind you of Jonathan Quick at all? Is there any kind of similarities?
Just their compete level, and I guess stylistically, yeah, it's a little bit there because they're unorthodox and they cover so much so quickly. But Jonathan Quick is an absolute, like, when you see Quickie, like in a this guy's like a tree trunk from the waist down. Like, and I don't know, he is not a small goaltender. Like, you might say whatever, he is so thick, and I don't believe Dustin is that. And that's a big difference with the amount, maybe stylistically, compete wise for sure. But Quickie is so thick. That's what it used to kill me, how flexible he was, because his legs and his ass are like, it's like a lineman in a football team, right? And that's why when his game started to fade, because when you're that thick and you start to pull muscles because of how acrobatic you are, it takes that much longer for those muscles to heal. And I think that was when Quickie started to get into trouble. How he goes side to side with those push-offs, and how incredibly powerful he is down low. But it'll be fun to watch. I mean, I'd love to see this kid do well, because obviously have the ties in Los Angeles, but he's just he's just, again, it's a nice story to see someone that's not that big play the position so well. And it'll be interesting to see if he can pull it off, because they're going to need him. But again, this team, you start looking at the standings and stuff, Josh. You look at, like, the Kings consider themselves Stanley Cup contenders, and they're probably right. You've got Vegas, who's the defending Stanley Cup champions. Vancouver every year is just right on that. They go on their winning streaks a little too late. But I mean, obviously, Talkett's got them in a good mindset. There's going to be some really the Edmonton Oilers. You're just in the same division. Like someone's got to not make it, and it's going to be a battle throughout. And I get Calgary's one of those teams that it's incredibly important for them to get off to a good start and have positive vibes. Like I think the starts are going to be so important for some of these teams because if you find yourself kicking tires or you're 2-8 coming out of the gate, it's like a mountain to climb to get back into it with the amount of good teams that there are.
Yeah, that West is going to be good. I have 5 teams out of the Pacific coming in, and I got 3 out of the Central. So that's kind of where.
Like other basically Anaheim and San Jose. I guess Arizona's still in that capacity of they're not there yet, but
they are in the Central, and they could be a sleeper.
Yeah, 100%. Somebody's going to be much better than expected,
Yeah.
and somebody that you really think this should be happening is something's going to happen that they're going to end up on the outside looking in. And
I just like Andre Tournier, and I like the moves that the Wild made. I mean, the Coyotes made on the back end. I think Sean Durzee's a good defenseman.
A great pickup right there.
Yeah, and I don't think maybe Matt Dumba gets the love that maybe he deserves too. He's on a bottom pair, and Troy Stetcher's another right shot defenseman that came into Calgary and did good, and goes back there, and Bukestad goes back there too. So we'll see what happens there. Clayton Keller's the real deal in my opinion. So, and what he came back from is definitely remarkable, and the pace he was on last year.
Jersey would have been a great fit where Klingberg is. That kind of style player, I would have thought would be a perfect fit for the balance in the back end there.
Yeah,
he's a throwback.
You got that right for sure. So let's move over to the wings. Maybe we'll finish up on this one. Obviously, Steve Yzerman had his handprints and his everything that he did in with the Tampa Bay Lightning is documented, and and then obviously Julian Brisebois comes over and it comes in and takes over and gets promoted, and Steve goes to Detroit, and the Red Wings have made the playoffs the last 8 years. In the last 4 years they've had the worst record. I know it's easy to pile on, and some of the moves he made to some people in the hockey world was a little bit questionable this year. We'll see what happens, but at some point, like I have them in that number 3 spot. I have Ottawa and Buffalo kind of ahead of them, but does the Wings need to make the playoffs this year, Futs, or where are you at with Steve Yzerman and what the Yzerman plan has going for him right now in Detroit?
The Yzerman.
Yzerman.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, this guy's a hockey wizard in my opinion. So I don't think you could expect, and I'm probably going to get there. I'm trying to look because the names are not coming. Who are there two? They brought in the top guy was with Vegas that always scores the goals. Walsh represents him.
Yeah. Well, they obviously
they brought in the kid.
They brought DeBrincat in, so that was a big player.
Okay. DeBrincat, but last year the guys they brought in just didn't. The older guys, I thought they were great pickups, and they just didn't have great seasons. And who was their free agent signing he was a big trade deadline acquisition, I think, out of Winnipeg, and then
that was Andrew Kopp. So
like there's a guy that I thought, based on
new additions this year is TJ Compher from obviously comes over from Colorado to Detroit, and then you got Christian Fischer, Alex DeBrincat. Those are 2 guys there that come in. Klim Kostin from Edmonton goes over there, so obviously everyone knows what Klim Kostin was able to do. And then Daniel Sprong, who had a great year. Jeff Merrick loves Daniel Sprong. That's probably son, as everyone.
Yes, he does.
So he comes over, and then obviously Justin Hall on the back end. There's a few, and then Jeff Petrie. He goes there too. So yeah, there's some moves.
Okay, you got to have a big year in net. You've got to have consistent goaltending, which they haven't had. Kopp was the one that the last year that I thought this was a great pickup who really struggled. Fabry's got to stay healthy. The one guy that I couldn't think of his name, David Perron, like that. I love that pickup, right? And I think he's going to have a bounce back. He wasn't horrible last year, but he wasn't up to
his standard.
his standards, And then of course, Sherratt, much more expectations. You got Gosselspur is going to provide you a little bit more offense in the back. I'm not still. I think Petrie's got to have a bounce back here. Moritz Seider is an absolute stud.
Wonder if Simon Edvinsson makes that team. He looks like he will, but that's
there's definitely, if any team has spots that are there for the winning, it is winning. It's based on they're going to have some youth. It's huge for them to make the playoffs. You can only go so long in a market like that. It doesn't matter who you are before people start to question you. But it's like the same thing, like forever. There's certain guys, because of who they are and how hard they work. This guy's arguably one of the best players in the history of Detroit franchise, that they deserve a little bit of extra time to get things turned around. And it kind of, for more how tough a situation it was left for him to fix. Because, when you come in and pick Seider right out of the gate, who was kind of off the board pick, and that was just a great pick, right? There's a franchise defenseman on the back end. Just takes a little longer to develop, but I wouldn't. He's one guy that I wouldn't. His competitive nature, I wouldn't think it'll take too long before Detroit's back in the hay. And that's why, again, you look in the East, somebody's got to miss it. And Columbus kind of doesn't do much for me. I guess one of the big, you're going to wait and see whether a Tampa Bay or a Boston takes a little bit of a step back in the regular season here. Boston in particular, losing the two, obviously losing Bergeron and Krejci stepping back. They added the big Luch there. This is going to help with with the competitive nature on that side. Again, there's not too many, like Ottawa. It's time for Ottawa and Buffalo to make a statement as well, right? So somebody is at some really good teams. How much does Washington have left in the tank? The Islanders. It'll be really interesting to see who the top teams are. And again, you just can't afford to have a slow start, and you can't afford any sustained losing streaks. You've got to be consistent.
That's not bad. I don't know. Like I wonder if Patrick Kane goes to Buffalo. Obviously, CAA's put out the video, and maybe he's a month away from being ready to take some contact and get back into the game. And obviously we know Jonathan Taves' situation that he's up against, but we'll see what Kane does. He's in the Ontario area kind of training, right? So I don't know if the Leafs can make that work. I don't see that happening. That's going to be.
I don't see that. Again, it's going to be, but you never know. When you see the gymnastics, like even we didn't talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins either. The expectations there. Holy smokes! You bring Carlson in. Like that power play should be very similar to the Toronto as far as looking like the Globetrotters out there with the amount of skill they can throw it at you. It's gonna really team toughness it's time for
but some
back here in net for sure. Charlie,
like they had Ryan Reeves in Pittsburgh and they got rid of him. Like it just,
I don't know. I think there was a point in Reeves' career that I think at that point, and it was the same. I think a little bit in Vegas. Like this guy's obviously a great teammate, but at that part of his career, I think he wanted a little bit more of a role playing wise. And I think he might have asked to be moved because he wants to play more. And I don't think that's an issue at this stage of his career with Toronto, that he's going to, he's looked fine to me.
Yeah. Doesn't look bad at all.
These guys don't fight anymore. Like everybody's like, when he's going to fight Jack Eye. And the only time you're going to see a fight, I think, with the big boys is when the regular season starts and it's for real. I think these guys almost have an agreement with it, unless somebody's running around like an idiot in preseason, they're not going to fight one another. But there's a lot of heavyweight matchups that are going to be really interesting once the big season starts. And I guess again, you look at teams like Montreal. Like I think I've got them behind. New Jersey's been lights out. Like Toff, like they look great. I guess same thing. You got to have some substantial goaltending. And I guess a little bit of question about the Islanders, Montreal being a little further back as far as teams that not as much expectations. Like what version of the Florida Panthers are we getting this year? They should be. They should be
guys.
Bobrovsky, if you get playoff Bobrovsky, that version early in the playoffs, they should be. They should be There's not a lot of easy outs. There's not a lot of easy outs when you look at it.
Do you think Rob Blake calls up Hayden Hodgson for the first game against the Vegas Golden Knights this year for what that hit on Stone?
I would, but who do you sit out, right?
Uh,
It's again cap wise. You've only got so many roster spots. It's a great thought, but if it means somebody's who's part of your roster is sitting out for the, I mean, I
it's
haven't seen enough of Hayden Hodgson in the preseason, other than I loved everything about that hit.
yeah.
To see is he worthy of? Did he do enough consistently throughout training camp, other than run over, other than the best hit of the training camp? I mean, I talked to Toff last night too. I was really surprised that hit by Trouba from behind. And Toff said they said he turned his back the last second. I just wanted to make sure he was okay because it looked really nasty when his face went into the glass there. But he's going to be fine. But it'll be interesting because there's some big hitters, and there's some tough. The East is like it kind of switches the guns, but now the East is like there's some nights that it's going to be some pretty big boys going at each other in a fierce way. So
Yeah.
Curtis McDermott might have to make the trip. Might have to make the trip east to make it a full gun show.
He's gonna have to do something for sure. It's yeah, because they don't play each other that much. So, but yeah, they got a big test against the. It's weird because Vegas, yeah, they haven't had the best preseason, but we'll see what. We'll see what shapes up there. Like they've. I don't know. Like I don't really take too much stock into preseason, to be honest. We've seen too many stories.
Especially with coming off winning a cup, because these guys. I mean it. I mean, you're going to get me going about the Blue Jays again. These guys actually won a championship and partied and enjoyed their summer. Okay. The Jays lose 2 games in a row at home and then throw on goggles and get canned out of their trees in a sport that you need your hand-eye coordination 2 days later.
Yeah.
And they're all going in, well, we're going to have to sleep in on Monday to get over the hangover from losing 2 in a row at home and having, what are you celebrating? Like, what are you celebrating at that point? Oh my God. Anyways, yeah. So Vegas, I wouldn't read it. I know when we came off our cup wins, it's just a natural tendency. As hungry as you are, the preseason is really, as far as going through the motions, you're the one team that has every excuse to kind of not, And I think the Stone hit kind of woke up, kind of poked a little sleeping bear that, hey, we're ready to go now. We got to get back into game shape because their blue line is just so good.
Yeah.
That that's just a key factor, and that's why we haven't even mentioned the Carolina Hurricanes, who I think is the best team in the East. And that is because that back end is fierce, like absolutely fierce. And I mean, Bunting seems to have fit in well, other than his relationship with Brandon Lemieux. Which, I mean, how many other teams is Brandon Lemieux going to go to and make enemies with who are supposed to be his friends? But it's going to be fun to watch. And that's for me, like there's Ottawa. It's just chomping at the bit. And who do you draw first? I think their first game's in Carolina.
And Ottawa an easy schedule, right? I think they're the first 16 games, they're home for the first 13 or 16 or something like that. So they got a really easy schedule, favorable schedule to start. So all right, Foods, anything else you want to plug before we kind of jump out here? Anything else you want to say, kind of what's going on?
Well, congratulations on the job you're doing. I think it's fun to watch. I mean, I really, as much as I enjoy all the time we've spent chatting, I thought the Biz Nasty show was a
lot of love, right? So
yeah, he's such an epic character. And I mean, especially coming off the week that he had, he certainly crosses some boundaries that I could never think of being crossed when I put my when I have my little filter on that what you'd like to say or what you think might be funny as regards to what you can say. And it's amazing to see how he just rolls through that stuff and how educated and prepared he is to talk about different things. And he's a fun dude, that's for sure. And I think it was one of my more entertaining episodes to not only be a part of, but to go back and watch and listen to that guy ramble. It's quite unique.
He is Yeah, it's interesting. Like obviously you know him very well, but yeah, just kind of connecting with him here after that, and before that, it was I'm still shaking, like thinking, yeah, how did we get him on? It's kind of cool. Like we're still this like
I'm still sick because I'm looking at my hair and I keep getting gray, and now I look at you and
I'm hiding
you
it
look
with
like Dolph Ziggler coming out through the cape with your new frosty nuggets up there. That's pretty good.
Shadowfied. They take care of you, right? So you have to.
Oh, I was going to say, one of your sponsors is going to be dipping into your
Yeah, when you come down to Edmonton at some point, Feuds,
color my hair for me.
we'll take you to
A
Shadow.
full blown Cody Rhodes.
Exactly. Cody Rhodes for sure. So, all right, Feuds. Well, you have a good one, everyone.
Sounds good, bud.
Stay safe. Take care. Have a good weekend, and happy Thanksgiving to you, your family, Feuds, and everyone else out there.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Josh.